The problem is not that we don't have an identity strategy. The problem is that we have 17. Like we have the privileged access guys doing their thing. We have these guys doing their thing. The AD guys are doing this thing. There's the cloud platform team, which is handling cloud identity as though it's any different. Because like from a risk perspective, it's all a shared risk. When you think about attacker behavior too, with something like Midnight Blizzard, you see an attack where you have a compromise of a cloud native identity through something like a password spray attack, using that identity to gain control of a cloud native application. Those cloud native applications have an underlying non-human service principal, a workload identity, taking control of that workload identity to then interact with a cloud native API, to then extract data from a cloud native service. If your focus as a security organization is primarily still on your endpoint, looking at my laptop here on my desk, you're in trouble because you're going to miss all of that. Like none of that is going to show up on any of your EDR telemetry. By the time any of it appears, it's far too late. And I think one of the challenges that I see working with security organizations in financial services is, and just to be clear, the endpoint space still matters, of course. Like this is still really the tip of the spear for phishing attacks and malware, and this is how attacks start generally. But my point is that attackers are now focusing on an ecosystem that never touches your endpoints. And the challenge with a lot of security organizations that are otherwise actually really sophisticated and really mature is that they may have 25 years under their belt, 24 years of managing an on-premises identity provider like traditional Active Directory. They have really well sort of thought through processes and robust, tooling for pulling logs and looking at network traffic and all this kind of stuff. In my experience, even in those organizations that are really sophisticated at doing other types of security, endpoint-based security, for example, or email security, when you start talking about cloud native identities, service principals, OAuth applications, API interactions, like their eyes glaze over. This is still a really difficult place where I would say many of the organizations I work with have not developed core competency in how you handle cloud native identity and cloud native applications. And it shows like in the way attackers are now focusing, because they know that. They know that people have deployed security controls in kind of isolated technology verticals. And the challenge with identity is it's not a product, it's a capability. It's end to end, it's horizontal. So like our businesses consume identity as a horizontal enabling service, much like how they would consume networking. But we don't approach it that way in tech and in security. We often think in terms of verticalized security tooling and controls, and that leaves lots of gaps in between, which attackers exploit. And so I think that's a real challenge for security organizations. The guidance I would give to security operations teams I work with is you've got to get good at managing cloud native identity and cloud native applications. This has got to become a core competency. And those capabilities actually do exist in these organizations. They just tend not to be in the cyber organization. They tend to be in cloud platform. They tend to be in, colleague platform, people that are handling, as you say, the sort of post-authentication authorization aspects, like the sort of policy engine component in the center of your zero trust model, which, in our universe is conditional access. That tends to live elsewhere. And I think, the organizations that are becoming more proficient at protecting, detecting, and responding in the modern identity space are the ones that are taking all these disparate organizational teams that are addressing slices of identity and actually kind of ring fencing them and pulling them together and saying, we have to approach this in a cohesive end-to-end way. Because the problem is not that we don't have an identity strategy. The problem is that we have 17. Like we have the privileged access guys doing their thing. We have these guys doing their thing. The AD guys are doing this thing. There's the cloud platform team, which is handling cloud identity as though it's any different. Because like from a risk perspective, it's all a shared risk. It's an identity risk. And attackers will pivot from the on-prem environment to the cloud environment, for example, using shared identity-based intermediaries like federation servers or synchronization servers. So from an attacker's perspective, they're like, it's all this one, giant juicy thing that I can bite into. We carve it up into pieces, and we actually are less capable as a consequence.